Hello and welcome to the 8th instalment of this exciting series of shows sponsored by Dublin City Comics and Collectibles, where we, the full force, take an in-depth look at the old Action Force comics in no particular order. For this beauty, we are delving into the backstory behind the UK's very own Destro, Red Jackal. I'm Chris Red Crackle McLeod, aka Diagnostic 80, and joining me on this new episode, as always, is Brian Phil McCrackle Hickey. So let's get on with it, shall we? Explosion.
For this episode, we decided to look at Baron Ironblood's cyborg sidekick from 1984 and get stuck right into the origin story of Red Jackal!
Nice.
Originally published in 1984 over 4 issues of Battle Action Force, numbers 489, 490, 491 and number 492.
Credits include writer Jerry Day on issue 489, 490 and 492 and Ken Owen on 491. Artist Tony Coleman, letterer John Aldrich on issue 489, Mike Peters 490 and Peter Knight 491 and 492. Colours by Mark Dodson on the Blood for the Baron Colour Project page.
The cast include Anton Novikov, aka Jackal and Red Jackal, Latvian street fighters including Big Igor, Soviet Union Army troops, Soviet Military Police, the GRU, numerous Soviet generals and senior officers, Red Shadow Troopers, Cossack, Russian general with Action Force, Z-Force troops including Harris and Baker, Red Sultan, Baron Ironblood, Red Laser, mentioned as a strange Japanese scientist, strange German doctor, top defense ministers, and African president and his party.
And then we also have Hyenas, the SAS Panther, Z-Force Jeeps, Z-Force Tank, and the Shadow Tracks as well.
This is the origin story of the Red Jackal, who started life as Anton Novikov, born in the Baltic port of Riga, capital of Latvia, USSR. He grew tired of life, street fighting with locals to stave off boredom, and was called up for military service at the age of 16, like every other boy in the Soviet Union at the time.
Novikov displayed a natural talent for driving and was soon getting noticed for it. However, his attitude towards the rest of army life left a lot to be desired, and it wasn't long before he was in trouble for stealing a commissar's car and taking it for a joyride at high speeds on the Moscow highway.
You've got to love this guy. Well, you've got to love him and hate him. But he just decides he's going to like, yeah, there's the commissar's car. I'd like to drive a fast vehicle. What the hell?
I mean, it's quite funny how, like early on, as you're reading through this, the kind of person he is. He's so one-track minded, no pun intended. All he wants to do is drive and fight and be a to people. Like they're the only things that really come out of this, aren't they?
He's a strange character for sure. On his, sorry. I'm still laughing at this guy because I just love that panel where he's looking out over his shoulder, looking out the window, and he's thinking, how I'd love a fast drive. Those officers' vehicles in the motor pool are the fastest. Next panel, I jump-started this car. Now for a fast run along the Moscow highway. Like, this guy's a nutcase.
I'm at maximum speed. Yeah, he's just a nut bar.
On his return to base in the stolen car, he is greeted by Soviet military police, or the GRU, and arrested. In Moscow, he is court-martialed and escapes being sent to the Gulag because a senior officer wants him for his driving skills.
I mean, he really, as we just mentioned, he's not the most likeable character, I don't think. But I think this is something Battle Action Force did really well, and that's that with the villains, they always made them actual villains. You don't necessarily feel sorry for them at any point. And like, you don't feel like he's had a tough upbringing or anything like that. He's just an asshole from day one, isn't he, on this particular story?
Pretty much, again, Action Force, Battle Action Force, the characters are black and white. You've got the bad guys, you've got the good guys. There's no grey area here. There's no ambiguity. They're creating stories for kids.
Yeah, so it's got to be clear, yeah.
They keep it really clear. So this guy, his behaviour is, it's really antisocial. And they're, from the outset, setting this guy up as, he's going to be a baddie.
Yeah, totally. So Anton is saved from the Gulag and the charges are completely dropped. He's promoted to corporal and given a position as a chauffeur for an important general heading to an international conference in Finland. So it's also telling you that this poor attitude will lead to to amazing things. But at the same time here, it's it's an interesting take, isn't it?
Clearly, there's something in his driving that this senior officer observes. He's like, okay, this guy's got something, and I feel I could use this guy. So this Russian general, he's going to this, really important peace conference in Finland. And of course, on the journey to Finland, the motorcade comes across a herd of reindeer who turn out to be red shadows in disguise. They attack and destroy the lead car, killing everyone inside but Anton and the general, who escapes thanks to Novikov's exceptional driving skills and ability to land the car on a raft of logs to make a dramatic getaway.
I always thought this was really far-fetched, but at the same time it's quite fun. So you can kind of let it go as just being like a fun little movie aspect, like a little Hollywood drizzled in there, can't you?
It sounds so ridiculous when we're reading
when you read it out,
the context of this. But when you see the panels, it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Of course you would disguise yourself with like reindeer carcasses and furs, to ambush a Russian military motorcade. And they do it so well. They go in, they lay waste to the vehicles. I mean, this is a lethal Red Shadow ambush. But Novikov, he is a superb driver. And this is like Dukes of Hazzard style, or, The Fall Guy, Lee Majors, The Fall Guy, these 80s TV shows style driving, as he just gets the hell out of Dodge and ultimately saves the general.
A lot of red shadows in disguises in this in this story arc, but also we get our first Wilhelm scream, as well as the first car in the motorcade gets attacked by the red shadows. You get an aye. So that's one down. I haven't actually taken note of how many there are in this issue, and there are a few more, but I always love pointing those out when they pop up. This amazing turn of events catches the eye of Action Force, and he is sent on to Turkey in a secret Action Force training ground in an Anatolian plateau, with Cossack, a Russian general, also signed on to the Action Force team. Nobikov is given the codename Wolf, but he declines it in favour of his own choice, Jackal. So even at this stage, he's being the Bertie Big isn't he? He's kind of going, no, you know what? I'm going to be Jackal. And then we see him in his Action Force uniform, which is quite, I don't know, it's jarring, isn't it? That's what Red Jackal is in the Action Force uniform.
Yeah, I mean, he's got that, that red beret. It's a very Z-Force looking. I don't think he's officially assigned to Z-Force, but you see that he's in the Z-Force colours, and obviously later we'll see him in the Z-Force Jeep. But that's a good point, actually. It's almost as if it's a Action Force general, like Action Force standard issue kind of thing, isn't it? And that Z-Force, obviously, like the Jeep and all those kind of vehicles are used in there. But yeah, I mean, there's an SAS Panther in one of the panels as well. So you get the feeling that this is like the level just before you become like put into whatever special sub-team you need to be in. Yes, it's like he'll specialize after he graduates from whatever basic training he's doing. But that's a key point where he deliberately chooses the name Jackal, which is a pack animal that doesn't necessarily have the same the honor that we associate with wolves. It's a more, we elevate the wolf into a much higher kind of level than the jackal.
Totally, and obviously that we will see that antisocial behaviour pop up again. But another thing I wanted to mention as well is it looks like Action Force have a really extensive reach, like a huge range in their recruitment program if they're getting people from, like the Russians as well.
Yeah, I mean, Action Force is famous for being, an international force. Yeah. So that was one of the key things. We had members on all the various Action Force figures. You had members from all over the world,
especially in Space Force as well, wasn't there? There was a Russian in Space Force and a Hot Jets, I think it was. A
huge reach in terms of the recruitment. So it was a real international effort to come together to fight against this psychopathic lunatic, that's Baron Ironblood, who has his own massive worldwide network. But we talk about the recruitment program. They clearly didn't have anything to filter out a-holes from the recruitment process.
No, it's like, they show really good tactics and skill in what they do. Anything else about them? Nah, we won't bother looking into anything else. He's a bit antisocial and doesn't work well with others. Perfect. Sign him up. It's crazy.
Once in Turkey, Jackal meets his fellow troops but is abrasive and dismissive towards their attempts at communication, only interested in trying out the Action Force vehicles on offer, even punching another trooper when he suggests riding along with him.
I thought that was really excessive, that punch, but also I suppose it's adding to that aspect of his character. But still, like, it was, when I was reading it, I'm like, dude, he only offered to join you for the ride and you just turned around and punched him and was like, "Niet, I'll go alone." And it's just like, wow, like, seriously, man.
That kind of comes out of nowhere. In a real world scenario, he'd be court-martialed for assaulting a fellow soldier. Yeah. But this is again, it's just part of relaying on that this guy is, and then of course we know his fate is not pleasant. So
I suppose they are like, they're softening the blow effectively, aren't they? They're kind of making it so that you're not going to feel too much for this guy, really. But also I've noticed as well, you get Harrison Baker. They don't have any code names, so you know immediately, they're going to be toast, basically. And then during one of his long excursions deep into the hills, he is spotted by Red Shadow spies and reported to the Red Sultan, who in turn reports to Baron Ironblood. Ironblood instructs the Sultan to bring back the man and the jeep he is driving. And this is the first appearance of the Red Sultan, isn't it? So that's quite cool. Let's throw a new character in the Red Shadows out there.
I actually love when the writers bring in these kind of sub-characters that could nearly have become figures in and of themselves.
Yeah.
I particularly like the Red Sultan figure in this story. I love the fez. He's got that kind of, Indiana Jones's buddy in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Is that kind of a thing going on? Only obviously he's a bad guy. He's totally committed to the Red Shadow cause. But again, a nice touch to, he's not just a vanilla Red Shadow. They've got a bit of they've got a character. They've created a character to flesh out the story here. Yeah,
and also we get Baron Ironblood pop up again. So he's not in it a lot, but when he is, obviously he's quite significant in the story because it's Baron Ironblood who obviously. We'll see in a second, but he has quite an important part in the story, but you only ever see him on computer screens, or you see him at his computer station when you're kind of having those back and forth conversations with the Red Sultan and what have you. So even though his part in the story is important, he's not really doing much, is he?
No, and one of the things, actually, this is a really common device that they use across a lot of these Action Force stories. So you would have had the writers try to keep, when you're reading the actual, the comics in chronological order, you can see that the writing team are trying to keep some sort of continuity to the story. So you never see Baron Ironblood in a mission over here in South America, and in the same comic, he's on a mission in Europe. So they use he's dialing in from satellite on a computer screen, and that's how they're able to kind of keep that continuity, that the sense of he's over here in this story, but he's able to broadcast in over there on this other story.
Yeah, it's a really good way of keeping everything in real time as well, as I suppose, for the Action Force kind of creative team. But really, really cool.
Nobokov is attacked by two shadow tracks, but manages to evade them, only to fall straight into another trap when Red Shadows, dressed as Z-Force troops, shoot him off a cliff into a ravine. Oh, what a way to go.
I know. And it's funny how we've seen him, utilising little jumps here and there throughout the story, like obviously onto the raft of logs. Then he makes it across this ravine on this, quite hard jump, and he makes it. And then he tries it for the third time. Unfortunately, it's third time unlucky for him, because as he's attempting to make the final leap to safety, they just waste him.
Yeah, they just totally sideswipe him there. I mean, that's gotta hurt.
I did think it was a stretch that he noticed the Red Shadow uniforms under the Z-Force clothing, especially from the distance when you actually see him kind of clock on, and you kind of think, well, maybe you'd see red, but why wouldn't you see red anyway with Z-Force, with the berets and all that kind of stuff? So I don't know. I feel like that was a little bit of a stretch, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's some sort of a technique to try and give him a bit of forewarning so he could take some action. But you're right. There could have been other signals that could have given that away.
They do it a lot in these comics, not just these comics, but comics in general, where you'll have people in like battlefield situations almost communicating with each other on different sides. Like they'll say something on one like one of the Cobras will say something on one side, and then like too far away to actually ever hear what they're saying, you'll have someone responding to it on the Joe team, and you kind of think you wouldn't hear what they're saying. You're in a battlefield situation for one, and even if there wasn't gunfire going off and explosions, you still wouldn't hear what they're saying from that distance. So, like, but they have to kind of do it to have that kind of back and forth, or to have them understanding what's going on during the battle and seeing that, you know, this is going to happen, and the other team need to notice what's happening. In this case, he needs to know that they're red shadows, like, hidden, but obviously that isn't the case. Like, they need to communicate that in some way, and that's how they do it. But I just thought it was a stretch that he could see that. And again, you have to suspend disbelief. That's the one. You have to suspend your disbelief in a lot of this stuff, totally.
Well, you know, one thing I would say is that you've got a writing team that have very tight deadlines. I mean, these guys are working on multiple IPC titles.
Yeah.
So IPC magazines own loads of stuff. So they're writing in War of the Rovers, they're writing in 2000 AD, they're writing in Battle Action Force. You know, massive deadlines, and then they've got minimum kind of real estate to get the story across. And so you're going to get these little shortcuts from time to time just to drive the story forward. Talking
about the short space that you have to kind of do stuff in, I thought the art's really good in that I love some of the action sequences where he's like skidding around corners and jumping ravines, and there's some really nice stuff where you'll see like the panels where he's looking towards the column of Action Force vehicles that he thinks are Action Force vehicles, and there's a nice panel where he's looking down the road behind the wheel, and there's, you know, all that kind of stuff. It's not hard to follow in any way, shape or form.
No, I mean, Tony Coleman's done a great job here on the art, and it is fast paced. And you know, I gave that analogy earlier of kind of like Dukes of Hazzard, you know, The Fall Guy, those kind of TV shows that at the time would have been, you know, on primetime TV. This Red Jackal, his driving skills or driving stunts fit really nicely into that kind of, you know, joyrider genre TV that was, you know, very popular at the time.
Yeah. The fall destroys the Jeep but doesn't kill Nobukov outright. However, he is so badly hurt that he will die if left there, so the Red Shadows collect the body for the Baron, and he gets Red Laser and another strange German doctor to perform experimental procedures on him to keep him alive. This part is really cool. There's a bunch of stuff I want to talk about here. First off, there's a really good panel where the actual Action Force have turned up with a helicopter in the background, which looks amazing. And they're at the scene of the crashed Jeep, which is already burnt out by now. There's nobody. They're like thinking, why would the Red Shadows take the body in the first place? But it's just a really cool scene, isn't it, of that kind of wreckage. The Action Force guys, which now look definitely like Z-Force guys, all in the berets, and the helicopter in the background.
Yeah, I mean, that's even before this. I think when the shadows come down to take the body, Nobukov's body away, even they're like, ooh, he's really badly hurt. He's not going to survive, but it's obviously Red Sultans who, you know, gets him out of there. But when the Z-Force guys come on the scene, they're just convinced he's dead. That, you know, there's no way he could have survived this. And you make the point there. I mean, these guys, they just look like Z-Force when they're on the scene.
Yeah, totes. This part where they're in the kind of surgery kind of scenario reminded me of the $6 Million Man and RoboCop, like that kind of thing of like, well, here's your dead person, basically, or close to death. We're just going to affix loads of bionic pieces to them to keep them alive, but at the same time, they're not really the same person anymore.
You know, tying in with that kind of popular TV culture of the time, this is exactly... You know, I would say these are exactly the references here. The $6 Million Man, the RoboCop.
Definitely more RoboCop, because there's almost that. There's a lot of the soul is taken away as well, isn't there?
Like there's nothing left of him. Like he's absolutely shattered. His body is in bits. And again, we get introduced to these strange laser scientists who've been brought in. One is German and one is Japanese. And of course, the only Japanese laser scientist we know in Baron Ironblood's army is, of course, Red Laser. Which we get to see him unmasked. In one of these panels,
which is really cool. Like I think we there's a few issues where we see him without his helmet on, but it's cool to see that they're dropping these kind of like hints, aren't they? I mean, even the German doctor's probably related to someone at some stage on here, but I can't think who it is.
Did we have a German doctor when we were doing the birth of Cobra Commander, and Red Jackal was going back down, tracking down the people who helped Baron Ironblood change into Cobra Commander?
I mean, he wasted most of the team that helped him, didn't he? So I don't know if there was anyone involved in that team that got away safely, because they were all wiped out, weren't they, the surgeons?
He did. I think he found one of them in a plane crash though. Or maybe that was a financier.
Oh, yeah, there was like bankers, I think they were. I think
Ah,
they were all
yes,
bankers because he was following the money trail, wasn't he?
He was following the money trail.
I'm sure it relates to somebody in Action Force, and I'm sure it's like we're just, being dumb and someone will like go, it's clearly this person. Be like, of course it is. But for the life of me right now, I can't think who it is. But in any case, I definitely think that's Red Laser. And I also think that the German doctor is referring to someone else that we've probably met at some point as well.
Yes. We will uncover this mystery as we work through the entire Battle Action Force back catalogue.
Make a note, Brian, because we've got some issues to cover.
We definitely have some issues. Everybody knows that. With the Red Sultan planning an attack on an international security conference in Istanbul, the Baron reveals his new creation, Red Jackal, a now bionic cyborg version of Nobokov, and forces the Sultan to include him in a second wave of attacks on the conference.
Interesting on this one, and this has nothing to do with like the original comic, but that the colorist Mark Dodson, who does the colors for the Blood for the Baron color project on this particular issue, it's interesting he went with the gold on Red Jackal's head as opposed to the silver, which is what he basically has as the figure, is what you kind of know Red Jackal to have in any case. But I kind of like the fact they've gone with the gold. It's quite interesting.
The gold is great. I mean, it works really well. It's, as an overall kind of color scheme and piece of character design, I think it's super choice.
But yeah, it's cool. And this is obviously it's not the first time we see the Red Jackal. Obviously, this is a not a retcon as opposed, but like a flashback story. So obviously we've seen Red Jackal prior to this issue, haven't we?
We have indeed. He's cropped up a couple of times, but this origin story really starts to flesh out where he came from and how he became Red Jackal. But that design, we talk about that, the golden dome, but you have this very sculpted face when we see him revealed in this story.
Yeah,
it's very robotic like. It reminds me more of the 50th anniversary Destro figure.
Yeah,
he's got that very chiseled kind of face.
Yeah, it actually reminds me more of Crichton from Red Dwarf, but we've discussed this in the past. And I think that color as well just adds even more Crichton to it. But no, yeah, I think it's really cool. It's interesting as well, like when we did the World Enemy #1, how different they make the other like Destro as opposed to Red Jackal. They really smooth out the helmet. They really change his physique quite dramatically. Like I feel like the Red Jackal follows the toy so closely. So like a smaller collar, a strangely thinner or kind of very straight down kind of physique. There isn't much to him in his body like the toy, but then the Destro figure is one they kind of really exaggerate the big collar, make him look very much like his cartoon version.
Yes.
His Action Force cartoon version. In any case, getting back to the story, the Sultan obeys Baron Ironblood's wishes, of course, and the Red Shadows go to the conference dressed up as local women to get by Action Force security. Action Force dispatched the troops with ease, only for the Red Sultan and Red Jackal to appear through the mist from another direction to successfully penetrate the conference and brutally gun down a number of important officials. And again, like the brutality that we mention every single time comes through pretty hardcore here, doesn't it?
There's no holding back on the violence in any of the stories in Battle Action Force, whether they're Action Force stories or whether they are the kind of the World War II classics like Johnny Red, or maybe we go back to World War I with Charlie's War. The violence is harrowing at times, and certainly in this particular scene here, as an adult reader, reading this now, this is a brilliant setup. In that we have the first wave of kind of suicide bombers go in. They're easy targets for the Z4 security, but they're totally not suspecting the second wave of attack, which is Red Jackal in this new hyena tank with Red Sultan operating the twin cannons up top, and they come in, they take the Action Force security completely by surprise.
Security.
It's almost comical how the Action Force troops are kind of joking about, we took care of these guys real easy. And one tank, two guys come in and just massacre everybody, blast into the conference. It's total carnage. The Sultan is killed during the attack, but Red Jackal escapes and disposes of the Sultan before being redeployed to the Horn of Africa to kill an African president who is opening a dam in the region.
Yeah, so this bit's interesting because we get two... They're clearly Z Force, as you can see the Z on their shoulders. So you can see those guys. They're the only ones that survive the attack, and they're sitting there. It's a Brit and a Yank. And this is where I think this is Harris and Baker from before. So you've got Baker's the Yank, isn't it? So Harris is the ex-Hussars. Now, is ex-Hussars British or Polish?
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it's probably not Harris and Baker, but it could be. When they refer to the Brit, it could very well be Baker from before, couldn't it?
It could be. I think it could be. So
let's just say it is.
we're going to call it to say that it is Baker, and I would think that the way the panels are set up, that it is Baker who takes the shot, that takes the Sultan down after his total carnage at the conference.
Absolutely. And then we see we see the Red Jackal literally just throwing him off a cliff just as a transport helicopter is on its way to pick him up, which looks like a Chinook as well, doesn't it?
Yes, some big Chinook coming in there, obviously to get him and his hyena tank the hell out of Dodge.
I was thinking about that because I wonder if he just gets picked up and they leave the hyena behind like every single time, just, for waste. But no, it would make sense, wouldn't it, that the transport chopper would... Because you wouldn't need a full-on Chinook just to pick Red Jackal up from a mission, would you? So yeah, you're right. He must be picking up the hyena as well.
I noticed as well, just as Red Sultan gets shot, one of our guys, maybe the American Z-Force trooper, says the driver, it looked like Nobokov.
Ah, so he has to know him, doesn't he?
He's got to know him, though he doesn't really look much like Nobokov.
No.
He used to look.
I wonder if that's like one of those things where they see his driving style or something and they think it's him. But yeah, no, I think that was a stretch because he looks nothing like he did as a... I don't think there's even any attempt to make him look like that, is there?
No, I mean, it's clearly... I'm just kind of lining up two pictures here. There's nothing.
No.
But do you know what? Prominent cheekbones.
Still, you look at Red Jackal, there's no way in hell you'd think, oh, that was Nobokov. But you might think if he did some like skid or jump or something, you might think, oh, hang on, that's what Nobokov does. Or like, he likes to do donuts on the bodies after he's run them over.
His trademark move. No, but he does have these really high and very pronounced cheekbones and this very prominent chin. So maybe it's a stretch. It's a stretch, but maybe
he took his helmet off inside the. No, that's me being ridiculous. But yeah, and again, something about this as well. That this whole part of the story, the Sultan's death, just shows how poor the protection is if you're a gunner on a hyena or a his tank. But surely you're going to be exposed. So why are you just rocking a fez? Unless it's a tactical fez. But I think he's kind of screwed up on that one.
I'd say, he's rocking a fez because he's just that bad. That's all there is to it. But
I'm not going to bother protecting myself up here. I'm just going to rock my usual clothes and this hat.
Oh.
And a tactical beard. That's all he's rocking up there.
That beard, the beard and the fez. I mean, he's rocking the bad look, but it doesn't save him. Won't save him from a Z-Force bullet. Not a chance.
And as you mentioned, we're now in the Horn of Africa. Now, this is kind of like a very quick, very thrown in there element of the story, and is very, very short-lived. But I mean, he kills the president and his party with ease before scuttling away once again. But he is, as you mentioned before, he's identified as Nobokov. So it's weird then. But I did feel that this was very rushed and slightly unnecessary to the story. I think having if you have a few named Action Force characters in the attack on the conference in Istanbul, it would have allowed them stretch out that story a bit more and focus more on that being the moment when Nobokov is identified, which he is. But I mean, I just didn't see the point of this element of the story. And you don't really get many more details about who this president is or anything other than he's sick, he's there to open a dam. And then other than that, it's just a party of people. There are no locals there to see it being opened. It just seems a little bit quick and a little bit weird. It's
kind of just thrown in there. I mean, if anything, it just gives a sense that this new weapon of Baron Ironblood's has just been set loose on the world and is just going on one mission after another in like a reign of terror. But as you say, maybe there was a missed opportunity there to put someone like Skip or Wheels, actually, this could have been Red Jackal versus Wheels. Could have been a great team up here,
Totally. Unless, was he being used elsewhere at the time?
Well, because this is a flashback story, that kind of helps you to get out of the continuity loop. And Wheels goes out after him, and he's the one who recognizes that Red Jackal is Nobokov because of the driving styles.
That could have been actually could have been easier than that, and like it could have been the fact that obviously they've never seen Red Jackal before. They've just taken a body away for no real reason, so it'd be safe to assume that they've utilised Nobokov's body to create Red Jackal. That if that's happening in a time frame of that can be clearly kind of viewed, but you could definitely have Wheels versus Nobokov, right, all the way through, and then they have this kind of head-butting kind of relationship, and then it's Wheels versus Red Jackal, and then Red Jackal could reveal it to him. He could say in another race of theirs, they could both end up crashing, get into a fight, and as he's like throttling him or something to death, he could reveal the fact that I'm Anton Nobokov, and you're going to know who killed you and all this kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? And then they could get that info then from, or that confirmation from Wheels, who was saved for, somehow hits him with a tire iron or something. But that would have been definitely a clearer and way more concise story, I think.
I think you definitely missed opportunity there to get that in, and they could have really marketed heavily the Z-Force Jeep, alongside the Hyena tank. Instead, it's down to that kind of time and space on the page, and we've got to close this story out as quick as we can.
Sure.
Let's just throw in another massacre, this time in Africa, just to show that this guy is he's been set loose on the world.
Do you think having the change of writers may have done that as well? Like obviously where we have Jerry Day on a couple of issues, and then Ken Owen takes over for one issue, and then Jerry's back on it again, right? I feel like maybe Jerry would have gone a different direction. Not necessarily had Wheels involved, but he might have gone a different direction. And then what happened in that third issue may have had to rejig what Jerry had planned for it. Do you think that might have happened?
Definitely could play a part in it. We're not fully aware of kind of what the writer's process is in these stories. Yeah. Do they map out an arc and then they're just really filling out the details for all the scenes? You'd imagine Jerry Day, obviously this is, he's one of the top writers in British comics. So you would kind of assume that maybe he has kind of an overall arc here, but maybe some of the story kind of gets diluted because clearly he's off this project for at least one issue. Yeah. Probably filling in on, Jungle Terror while Scott Goodall was maybe had to take a step back from that for some reason.
Yeah, chopping and changing between creative staff does have an effect on the overall product at the end of the day. Sometimes like people can come in and it's like, the artist will draw just as the other artist drew, just to keep the kind of, I don't know, like the visual aspect in continuity. But it has happened load in the G.I. Joe comics. You get loads of different creative teams issue to issue, sometimes in the same arc, and then you end up with General Hawk in two different costumes. And so it's an interesting kind of way to do things. You think with a story arc, it's like, this is the team, you deal with it, move on. But yeah, back then you were churning this stuff out, weren't you? And it wasn't just Action Force that was coming out. Like you say, it was 2000 AD and Roy the Rovers and loads of other issues that these guys are tied to, having to come out on time. I doubt anyone got any sleep during this period of time. They're still probably up now working on it.
I could just imagine that those creative studios like smoking in the studio. Yeah. Probably, beers, whiskeys, and staying up late.
Heroin.
A lot of late night.
Tons of heroin. In any case, we do get to the end of the story, don't we?
The story ends with a message from an Action Force computer that says, "Damn assailant definitely identified. Nobokov codename Red Jackal. Attack vehicle to be codenamed Hyena. Conclusion, Iron Blood has created a deadly combination to serve his cause. Order to all units, stamp out those scavengers."
I find that also quite interesting that they use something that I never really noticed before, and you can just call me an idiot for this, whatever, but the Hyena and the Red Jackal, I never put those two together at all. Obviously they are together, but I never thought about the names behind them. And obviously hyenas and jackals, very similar kind of animals, both scavengers, and in this case, stamp out those scavengers, I like, isn't that a nice touch, referring to both the Red Jackal and the Hyena tank. And again, it's a really good way of promoting that toy at the time as well, isn't it?
I never thought of that either. Do you just accept that, the names of the characters and the vehicles, but absolutely there's a perfect connection between the Hyena tank and the Red Jackal pilot or driver. And of course, in our final panel there, we get that nice little shot of the actual animal, the hyena, in the foreground, and we see our Hyena tank in the distance with, again, the Chinook coming in to pick that up.
Is it a hyena or is it a jackal?
I always thought the jackals kind of they were smaller dogs with bigger ears. I would have thought that was a hyena, but
fair enough. I'm just thinking, like, in terms of the thing being about the Red Jackal, I know the hyena is obviously connected in that sense. I'm going to have a quick look at both animals just to double check. Do you know what? There's no way that's a jackal. You are totally 100% correct. That, my friend, is a hyena. So I do find that quite interesting, though. Like, the fact that we're talking about the Red Jackal, and I know, like I said, the hyena is quite important to this as well. But you'd think they'd have maybe both on page as well, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, they're in Africa, so there's plenty of opportunity to kind of work some of these some of the wildlife into some of these panels.
Have a mating to show the symbiotic nature of the two. The hyena could be going full, like, literally hammer and tongs out the back of a jackal, and this is where we find out that jackals and hyenas are not you're never in, like, the same country. And I'm just gonna double check on that. Well, South Central Eurasia.
Okay, so they're not even African.
Sub-Saharan Africa as well. Yeah, there is a jackal in Sub-Saharan Africa. So yeah, they're all over the place. We'll just say that they can definitely exist on a comic page anyway, can't they? But I thought it was interesting that you had that visual, very, very cool.
Yeah, it's a nice outro panel. I think overall this is a really good origin story for this particular character.
Yeah,
we get this introduction to the Hyena tank. I mean, it's very obviously been on the shop shelves long before this story hits the pages. But the creative team just really showcased this really important weapon in the Red Shadow arsenal and do a nice job in this particular story.
Interesting that just a year later they'd be getting the Hiss tank as well. So I suppose one last final hurrah to get some toys sold in a way. That's what it feels that way to me too as well. Again, like I thought this was a really interesting origin. I think the fact that he was an Action Force member for a short time makes him even more interesting as a character, and also explains a lot of the animosity between Jackal and Ironblood, because obviously Ironblood in World Enemy number 1, the way that Red Jackal aggressively tracks him down after Ironblood left him for dead and ratted him out to Action Force, you'd think that the Red Jackal felt he had sacrificed a huge amount to the Red Shadow cause and would definitely feel betrayed, considering it was his fault for making him that way in the first place. So you can definitely understand the overall, like, from that particular moment onwards, that there's going to be this animosity between the two.
Absolutely. It's a brilliant setup for the animosity that would be really obvious in a later part of the kind of the Action Force story. But for sure, Red Jackal, he's a mean piece of work and a really good fit for Baron Ironblood's evil organisation.
Totally. So after all that's said and done, Brian, what are you going to give this as an overall rating, potating? I
did enjoy this story. It wouldn't be one of my favourite Action Force stories, so I'm going to go in with, I'm going to give it a 4.
Wow.
It's still good, but there's some gems in the Action Force catalogue that are just way better than this. But it's a nice, short, sweet little story, and the fact that the bad guys come out on top, that's something you don't see very often, so I'm going to give it a 4.
I kind of agree with you on that one. I'm going to go, because I think, like, it's fun, it's interesting, it's an origin story, so it kind of, explaining a bit more mystery, kind of explaining some of the mystery behind a character, which isn't something I'm always that keen on. Like, I do like some of my characters to maintain the mystery behind them, like Snake Eyes and Destro in the Action Force comics, I always thought definitely had this strong element of mystery attached to them because they never revealed their faces. Like, if they did, it was always very subtle. Like, that I think one of the early Action Force weekly issues had Destro and Cobra Commander taking off their masks, but you didn't see them clearly. Like, it was in the dark, in like the shadow was across their face, so you didn't really see what was going on. The same with Snake Eyes. Like, there's one story where he has his mask ripped off, but the camera takes the picture, but you don't see it. You don't see the panel that would show his face. So there's like, I feel like that is so much more. It adds so much more to a character when you don't know everything about them. Sometimes origins I think are okay and cool, but it's usually when they've run out of main story to tell. And with the Red Jackal, I don't think it was necessary to go that deep, but it's nice to see that it's like one of those things. It's like, oh, he's in Action Force. He was in Action Force for a very short period of time. Oh my God, that's amazing. So there is a big kind of fun reveal in that. And so, yeah, I think that kind of bumps up a little bit more for me, but there is definite shortcomings in it. Like that Horn of Africa story at the end does not make sense to be thrown in there. It doesn't make sense. It's not necessary. We know he's a badass. You don't need to do it again. Like we've just seen him go into a conference and gun down a ton of people. So it's not like, what difference does it make? Like we know he's the kind of person that will do that. I'm more interested to see him develop as a character, knowing it's Anton Novikov, and how is that character dealing with being this cyborg. That's what I'm more interested about. Does he contain any memories of being Anton Novikov? Does he have that about him as Red Jackal, or is he a complete cyborg at this point? That's the kind of aspect of this character I want to know about. So for me, I think they missed opportunities. You're right, by not including Wheels as the Action Force, I suppose, driver equivalent of Red Jackal.
Yes, yeah.
That's massive. So I think it loses a lot of points for me on that. And I'm going to therefore go, I would have gone 4, but then having talked myself around it with these kind of missing aspects, I think I'm more 3.5 on this one. And I think it's harsh, actually. I think it sounds harsh, but I still think it's a fun story to read. I certainly wasn't bored. I just think that there are aspects of it that really missed the mark on this one. So I'm going to go 3.5 potatoes.
All right. Okay.
Done.
You're done. Red Jackal's in the bag.
We've got another one in the bag, Brian. Another one in the bag. Any thoughts on what we might do next? I mean, are there any... we should probably do that one that lasts for about 500 issues, which was... that, or did we do that one, the desert one? We did, didn't we?
We did Desert Strike. We've done that. I actually had started work on Operation Bloodhound, which basically chases Baron Ironblood all over South America.
Brilliant. It's
an epic story, absolute epic proportions, but it's a great story. So I'd made a start in that. Now that's a big one to cover. So I would hope, getting a bit more time now, I can sort of flesh that out, but I'd need to kind of tip away at it over a few nights.
Oh, totally.
To pull that together. But you get so much SAS Force action, wins and loses and losses for SAS Force as they kind of hunt Baron Ironblood from country to country across the South American continent. It's pretty cool.
Awesome. Well, okay, we'll aim for that one next. And then obviously in the meantime, I can always knock up a few smallies in the gaps. So that's not a problem. But yeah, we don't know what we're going to do next on this one, guys, but there'll be more frequent, the Disorder of Battles. So we'll make sure to get those out a bit quickly. But anyway, dude, thanks for jumping on and chatting Disorder of Battle one more time.
Oh, my pleasure. I love talking Battle Action Force.
Totes, it's actually, yeah, it goes on for a while, doesn't it? Anyway, dude, that's it for this instalment of Disorder of Battle. Thank you to my co-host Brian Hickey and to our sponsors Dublin City Comics and Collectibles. See you next time, and as always, full force and blood for the Baron, I suppose, as well.
Blood for the Baron!
Good, because I'm not going to scream that. Make sure you get involved with the discussion by liking, sharing and commenting on these videos, and as always you can keep up with the show after listening by following on Twitter @TheFullForce, liking the Facebook page facebook.com/TheFullForce, and if you would like to contact the show you can message us on either of those platforms with feedback or questions. We have also started a Patreon page, so if you want to see your name up in lights on these videos or enjoy exclusive bonus content, then check out patreon.com/TheFullForce podcast, or click the link on any of the posts this podcast appears in. Full Force. And a big shout out to our sponsors, Dublin City Comics and Collectibles. Located at 46 Bolton Street, Inns Quay, Dublin 1, Ireland, you can visit their website at dublincitycomics.ie and on Facebook at facebook.com/Dublin City Comics.